poi risale ancora quando scivola e ritorna su. E poi sprofonda ancora, tu non puoi parlargli mai d'amore, che lui non ti sta a ascoltare e poi ridi quando...
La traducción, digo, la conferencia será en inglés y con traducción simultánea al castellano. Los que no tengáis auricular y lo necesitéis, hay que dejar el DNI y se os dará un auricular allá. Bueno, pues es un placer para mí presentar a Keith Lindsey, miembro de Anamed. Anamed Internacional es una ONG alemana que trabaja especialmente en países de África subsahariana para el desarrollo de la medicina natural, especialmente de fitoterapia. Ellos están trabajando con plantas que cultivan en los mismos poblados en los que están los pacientes, y nosotros los conocemos desde hace unos 3 años casi 4, porque desde la Asociación Dulce Revolución estamos utilizando su planta Artemisia para la malaria. Entonces hemos estado en contacto para la obtención de semillas que ellos pues cultivan, que ellos producen de muy buena calidad, y también tenemos pues toda su bibliografía, sus experiencias para transmitirlas a las personas pues que lo necesitan de África. Él nos va a explicar todo esto y mucho más, otras plantas con las que trabajan. Entonces, bueno, espero que os guste la Keith Lindsey. Un poco para presentarlo más, es ingeniero químico, pero hace ya 25 años que trabaja en fitoterapia y en medicina natural. Aunque es inglés, se mudó a Alemania y trabaja desde Alemania con la Asociación Anamed y viaja constantemente al África. Me ha dicho que, aunque, pues, por ejemplo, tienen cultivo de plantas directamente en unos 20 países, sus talleres o seminarios que hacen para enseñar y sus libros están prácticamente en toda el África subsahariana. O sea que es una asociación pues que tiene sus raíces muy bien extendidas. Entonces nada más, os dejo con Keith y espero que os guste la exposición. Okay, Keith, as you wish.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Can I first apologize that I'm speaking English and that I'm not speaking Spanish and I'm not even speaking German. So I hope you're not disappointed if you were hoping for a speech in German. My name's Keith Lindsey. I thank you very, very much indeed for the invitation to be with you this afternoon. And I'm very, very happy to share with you some of the things that have really excited me in my work with Anamed over the past 13 or 14 years. But first of all, I must say I'd like to congratulate you and the organizers of this event for the imagination and the organization that you put into it. And I really hope that the whole event will be an enormous boost to the whole concept of healing plants, good nutrition, local production, and all the other excellent aims that you have for the event here. Okay, Anamed, Action for Natural Medicine. Our headquarters is in a small town called Winnenden in Germany, but we're active in many parts of Africa. And indeed, this wonderful plant that I have growing here on my left-hand side, and congratulations to the gardeners, this wonderful plant, Artemisia, which is useful for so many, many different things, which I'm delighted to have near to me, because I feel that at the end of the afternoon, after I've been standing here, I'll be much more vigorous than I am now. This is now to be found as a result of our work in most African countries, South America and Southeast Asia. Although, yes, as I'll tell you later, it exists in some of those places in much bigger quantities for other purposes. So the title of my talk this afternoon is Natural Treatment for Malaria, AIDS and Cancer. There we have pictures of 3 very important plants. The first one is this plant here, Artemisia annua. The second one is Moringa oleifera. Moringa is a plant that I think pretty universally now been recognized as being of increasing importance for a whole variety of things throughout the tropical world. And then aloe vera. And you know, I come to Africa quite a lot, and aloe vera grows there very, very easily. And so I come into the poorest communities and I say, hey, do you know how rich you are here? And they look at me a little bit surprised because they expect me to say, oh, I can't believe how poor you are. But I say, can you believe how rich you are? Not only do you have the sun blazing down on your land all day, but you have aloe vera growing here. And they're quite surprised when I tell them that if we go and buy soap, for example, that contains aloe vera, we pay twice the price. Oh, can we export it to Europe then? Okay. This is a map that just shows you the countries in Africa in which we, Anamed, have conducted seminars. By a seminar, I mean a training seminar in natural medicine, where we bring together about 30 people. Sometimes they can be doctors and nurses. Sometimes they can be traditional healers. Sometimes pastors. Always others active in the community. And we live and work together for 6 full days, discussing a whole variety of topics that relate to this question of health. And as I'm sure you can imagine, sometimes at the beginning of the week there's quite a lot of apprehension and mistrust because really doctors are a little bit suspicious of traditional healers, and traditional healers are really don't like doctors at all because they take their customers away. And of course the doctors don't like the traditional healers because they see that they sometimes do dangerous things, and their patients come into the hospitals with cuts on their skin where the traditional healer has put the medicine into, for example. And then there are people of different tribes sometimes, and of course not every tribe gets on with every other tribe terribly well. But it's a wonderful experience to see how in the course of the week bridges are built and a mutual understanding develops. And that's part, I think, of what our work is all about. So what are our aims as Anamed? Well, to save lives and to help people to enjoy better health, particularly of the poorest people. Secondly, to promote self-reliance in both preventing and treating a lot of diseases and common health complaints. And thirdly, as I say, to promote a spirit of working together, a spirit of solidarity, a spirit that we benefit in our health, in our mental, spiritual and physical health, if we actually work together rather than as competitive individuals. So the question is, how do we achieve our aims? Now, I show this picture. I'm sure you all recognize this particular plant. If you don't, let me tell you, it's a papaya. And sometimes the papaya is called the pharmacy plant. And it's called the pharmacy plant because it's capable of helping with so many different health problems. We all know, of course, that the ripe fruit is very delicious, that it's rich in vitamin A, it's rich in all sorts of minerals and other vitamins. So if we eat fresh papaya, if we're living in Africa or South America, where the plant comes from, if we eat this fruit regularly, then it can make a big contribution to our health. Unlike some people who say, papaya is not for us, we give them to the pigs. Well, I think they have very healthy pigs, but the people sometimes suffer. The unripe fruit is very useful because it contains a particular enzyme called papain, and this particular enzyme, papain, has got the properties of being very disinfectant. So it's particularly good for treating wounds, infected wounds. Many people, I'm sorry to say, have got wounds on their legs that they've had for 1 year, 2 years, even longer. And in that, they might have tried any manner of antibiotic creams, but they come along and they mix some of this sap, the white sap from the unripe pawpaw. If you take the unripe pawpaw and make a cut, then you get drips of this white sap. Mix that with sugar, put it into the wound, and it has a remarkable effect. As does, I might say, the gel from aloe vera, as does the oil from neem. And I think I've heard a lot of people talking about neem in the time that I've been here. It's helpful for worm infestations in the stomach. It's helpful for treating malaria. It's helpful for treating diarrhea. It's helpful for treating cough. If you don't have papaya in your garden and you live in the tropics, then you're missing out on a complete pharmacy. And the little diagram shows that natural medicine has something to do with bringing together the world of plants together with the world of medicine, the world of medicine with accurate dosages. More about that in a minute, yes. So, in the course of this presentation, I'm going to cover what we mean by natural medicine, to describe in some detail, because I think you're all interested in this plant, I hope so, and if you're not now, I hope you will be by the end of the talk, especially with regard to malaria, and then to describe our experience with Artemisia and Moringa with regard to AIDS, and finally just a few remarks about cancer. So, natural medicine is it's not witchcraft. And I'm so sorry that years ago when the Europeans first came to Africa and they saw some terrible things happening in terms of witchcraft, and indeed they really were sometimes terrible, they threw out the baby with the bathwater and said anything to do with plants is evil and from the devil. And even today, there are many people in Africa, particularly in Uganda, who, if I say, well, look, maybe you could use papaya to treat your problem with worms, they'll say, oops, no, I can't do that, I'm a Christian. Oh dear. I think if we're a Christian and don't eat any plants, for example, then we're going to have big problems. And so we have to rethink our Christian theology in that respect, and that's a very interesting challenge. And so now people are totally confused because I come as a European and say, hey, your plants are wonderful. There are also many traditional herbalists, of course. And, well, natural medicine is based upon traditional herbal practice, but it's more than that. So, yes, please. So, how do we benefit from traditional herbal medicine? Well, it has many advantages. It uses locally available resources, because anywhere you go, you at least see a papaya plant in the neighborhood, for example, or you see lemongrass, or you see neem, or you see other things that are very medicinal. And just start asking in the village and they'll show you lots of plants that you've never even seen before that have medicinal properties. It accords with the local language and culture, so that means you don't have to put on your best accent and best clothes to go and see the doctor, so the doctor understands you. You can talk in your own dialect, and when you talk about your situation at home, the healer understands because he belongs to the culture. And even in the remotest areas, there is usually a healer available. You don't have to walk for 5 kilometers, take a clapped out car for 10 kilometers or even 50 kilometers in order to reach the hospital. There is help available on the spot. Yes. What are the advantages of our modern medicine process? Well, it's scientifically based. There's been a lot of research done into everything that all the medicines that we have. and the medical procedures. The methods of preparation for the different medicines are very well thought through, and they're consistent, they're the same every time. We get pharmaceuticals in nice packages with clear labels, and we're told what the dosage is, and we're told what the expiry date is. All very, very important. In contrast, of course, sometimes in Africa you can go to a market and you'll see a traditional healer and he'll have bottles on the table full of liquid and no label in sight. And of course you say to him, excuse me, but what do you have in that bottle? That's my secret. Okay, next. So, natural medicine, according to our definition, combines the advantages of both the traditional herbal medicine, which I have listed again on the left-hand side, together with the advantages of modern medicine, which I've listed on the right-hand side. And of course, developing this concept of natural medicine demands a degree of humility too, because we must never claim that we can treat any and every condition. We certainly are not going to conduct any operations. We don't have modern test facilities. So we've got to know when it's right to refer people to the hospital. And by and large, the hospitals are very happy if we have Anamed trained people in the neighbourhood, because that means they can then concentrate their resources on the more serious cases, because the people with coughs and colds and fevers and so on, and diarrhea can be so easily treated by natural medicine. They're very happy not to have that problem. Yes, thank you. A little bit about Artemisia annua for its treatment with malaria. And the question is, if we drink Artemisia annua tea, is it good? Well, we're not always convinced about the flavour, but I can assure you that in terms of effectiveness, it's as good as anything that exists. Okay. Just a few words about the background of malaria, because I find this very interesting. Even today, there's a vast amount of malaria. Many, many people suffer from malaria, and in some places it's even getting worse today. There's about it's very hard to estimate, of course, but there's about 1 million deaths every year, which means 3,000 a day. Now, you remember how in 2001, was it, when there was this attack on the World Trade Center? There were 3,000 deaths in one day, and that changed the course of history. Well, we have 3,000 deaths every day from malaria. Does that change the course of history? Maybe if it was in Europe here, it would. But I'm sorry to say, because it's in Africa, it's somehow not quite as important. And of course, malaria affects children's education if they're off sick, and it affects the economy, the local economy and the national economy, because so many firms have so many absences because of sickness due to malaria. Yeah. The United Nations, the World Health Organization, have declared these Millennium Goals, and some of these Millennium Goals, which were meant to have been achieved by the year 2015, which is getting closer and closer, don't look like being realized, including this one to have halted by 2015 and begun to reverse the incidence of malaria, HIV, AIDS, and other major diseases. I can very happily say that where we have Anamed trained people, this has come true today, but universally it's sadly not true. Okay. So, very briefly, just over 100 years ago, it wasn't even known how malaria was transmitted. It was thought it was because of bad air, hence the name malaria, bad air. Until it was discovered by a doctor working in India that it was in fact the mosquito, a particular mosquito called Anopheles, that transmits malaria from one person to another. And then the world authorities got together and said, well, we must therefore get rid of mosquitoes in order to try to get rid of malaria. And they first of all thought, well, mosquitoes breed in stagnant water. We must get rid of all stagnant water, which of course to some extent was very good because mosquitoes breed on stagnant water. So if we have rainwater collection tank outside our house, we need to cover it with a mosquito grid. But we must make sure there's no rubbish, no empty tires, no tins, no plastic that collects water when it rains. And any still water, we must minimize that. Rivers are fine where it's moving, but where it's stagnant, it causes a problem. But the more serious thing that was decided was to spray the mosquitoes with DDT, with an insecticide. The DDT was discovered both to be very cheap and to be very effective in killing the mosquitoes. And so DDT was used throughout the world. Now I imagine that most of us today in this room throw up our hands in horror at the thought of spraying so liberally with DDT. Because we now know that DDT does not break down in the environment. It accumulates in certain, in our bodies, in certain animals, and it becomes very concentrated. Even today, I'm sorry to say, though, there are some countries wanting to use DDT again to combat malaria. In fact, for those of us who are environmentalists, the good news was that the mosquitoes eventually developed a resistance to DDT. Well, good news for the environment, but bad news for those suffering from malaria, because the incidence of malaria rose again very, very rapidly as soon as the mosquitoes had developed this resistance. We can be happy that in Europe, malaria was eradicated. But then there was another crisis, of course. Then it was discovered that a particular tree growing in the tropical rainforest called the cinchona tree, they extracted something called quinine from the bark of this particular tree, and they found that quinine was very effective in treating malaria. And when they analyzed this in the laboratory, they found that they could make a synthetic chemical very similar to quinine that was very, very effective in treating malaria, and this was called chloroquine. And so this was widely distributed, very cheap, very effective, and once again the world breathed an enormous sigh of relief and said, we've cracked it. But you know, you can't fight nature all the time, and this time it was the malaria plasmodium, the parasite that is in the blood, that developed the resistance to chloroquine. And once this resistance started, then it spread very, very rapidly, and very soon throughout the world, chloroquine became useless because the plasmodium were resistant to chloroquine. So then there was another panic. And this was at the time of the Vietnam War. And the stimulus for further research, believe it or not, was that both the Americans and the Vietnamese were losing more people to malaria than to the fighting in the war. So both the governments of America, and in this case China, became very, very active in researching a new treatment for malaria. And in China, they investigated every plant that had been used for the treatment of fever or malaria. And eventually, they came across this particular plant, Artemisia annua. Yes, next one, please. They extracted from the Artemisia annua a key ingredient called artemisinin. And this, they found, cleared the plasmodium in the blood faster than any other known chemical. So they were absolutely delighted, of course. But because of the political difficulties between China and America, this information didn't actually develop into a good pharmaceutical drug for another 20 years or so. So the pharmaceuticals based on Artemisia, or more accurately expressed, pharmaceuticals based on the constituent artemisinin. There are vast plantations of Artemisia in China and in East Africa, probably other countries too, where the farmers cultivate Artemisia annua, they harvest it, they dry it, and they sell it to the pharmaceutical company. The pharmaceutical boys then take it to their chemical factory and they extract the artemisinin and they make the medicine out of it. And for several years they were selling artemisinin in different drugs as the treatment for malaria. Very, very effective. But then in Asia there was the first sign, believe it or not, of what? Yes, you've got it, resistance developing to artemisinin. And the World Health Organization threw up its hands in horror and said, well, if artemisinin fails, we've lost everything. And so they recommended or encouraged the pharmaceutical industry to develop what today is called artemisinin combination therapy. In other words, combining artemisinin together with another antimalarial drug with a different form of action. And the idea is that if there's two targets to aim at, it'll be more difficult for the plasmodium to develop resistance. And so the best known of these artemisinin combination therapies is called Coartem. If you've traveled in Africa, I'm sure that you've heard of Coartem. Yes. But even with a very effective drug, it's still not straightforward. Because, first of all, 80% of people in sub-Saharan Africa don't go to the health center first, they go to their local healer or the people in the village who they think can help. Even if they want a modern drug, and they go along to the pharmacy or the hospital, often they're not there. Secondly, if they are there, they're often so expensive that they cannot afford them. If they demand, for example, the equivalent of 10 euros, something we pay immediately if it was a matter of treating a serious disease, for them, if it's a month's income, then, wow, maybe it's actually not possible. And even worse, what I think is verges on being murder, there are many cowboys who actually produce fake drugs. The packaging is wonderful, it looks absolutely right, it looks like the proper drugs, but it contains maybe 1% of what it should do. So, yes, we actually think that Artemisia annua tea is an excellent alternative. And I say good tasting in these commas because I think it's a matter of taste. Some people say, I couldn't drink that to save my life, and other people say, bitter, yeah, I like that. People are amazingly different. But look, the tea contains 10 antimalarial substances. And so the tea itself contains so many antimalarial components that it's a combination therapy in itself. And so we promote this very, very confidently because we say, look, it's more likely industry that's going to cause the problem of resistance developing than it is Anamed, because the tea contains so many antimalarial substances, and anyway, as far as we know, resistance has never developed to a whole plant product. Pharmaceutical industry delights in its so-called silver bullets. They extract one component and say that's what you need to treat your disease. In natural medicine we work with whole plants, and so often there's this synergistic effect between the various components that both make the medicine more effective and tend to reduce the possible side effects. Yes. So there are objections. The first is that, I'm sure you've heard this, how do you know it's effective? The fact that you've seen people actually recovering from malaria is not good enough. The fact that we get feedback from here and here and here to say that, well, it works very well indeed, thank you, is not good enough. They demand clinical trials. But clinical trials are expensive, and who's going to pay for them? Because we can't afford it, and no pharmaceutical company is going to pay for it. So the second objection is that there's too little artemisinin, and if you underdose with any drug, like if you don't take your full treatment of antibiotics, then there's a danger that a resistance will develop to that drug. Well, I've already told you that, explained that it's almost impossible for this resistance to develop because there are so many antimalarial components. So a word about cultivation of Artemisia. I hope this is of interest. I just know that so many of you have had contact with Artemisia already. And out of all the plants that we talk about when we conduct our seminars in Africa, Artemisia is the only one that we bring with us. And it happens to be a little bit more tricky to cultivate than the plants that already grow there. So, first of all, the Artemisia seeds. The seeds are very, very small. And I feel quite confident that if Jesus were alive today, he wouldn't be saying the kingdom of heaven is like the mustard seed, which grows from a tiny seed to be a plant big enough for the birds of the air to sit in it. He'd be saying the kingdom of heaven is like the Artemisia plant that's so tiny, but from one plant is capable of treating, healing so many people from malaria. Well, maybe, maybe not. Now, the first thing that's unusual, it's not unique, but it's unusual, and that is that Artemisia seeds germinate in the light. That means that they shouldn't be covered with earth, like we usually cover our seeds. No, not so fast. So there we see, first in a seminar up there, we planted some seeds in little cups on little peat discs, which we've decided is environmentally not a good idea now. Below, we sow seeds on the lid of a bucket. And the lid of a bucket's a much better idea because with the lids of a lot of buckets, you can turn them upside down and sit them on the bucket, fill the bucket with water, and then the seeds are watered from underneath. If you watered the seeds from on top, you'd wash them away because they're so tiny. And then if we put the seed bed also inside a polythene bag, then it creates a very humid environment and stimulates the growth of the seeds. And then that's what the seeds look like just 3 or 4 days after sowing the seeds. They germinate quite quickly in the light. Yeah. So we then pick them out into pots. The top right is a pot made out of banana leaves, which obviously is environmentally first class. This very active and enthusiastic lady at the left-hand side, a teacher called Rose, who involves the children very much in growing Artemisia and mixes the Artemisia with all her other plants, so she's got a very mixed culture, excellent idea. Has got a very good nursery, and I would encourage everybody to have a nursery. But look, she's using the plastic bags. And okay, plastic bags are very good, but those of you who've been to Africa know that there's no good waste disposal system for black plastic bags. And they cause they're an eyesore, and when the cows come along and sniff them, especially if they've got a bit of salt on them, and eat them, then that's the goodbye to the cow. Yes, bottom right you see a nice healthy seedling. And then we recommend growing on a family or a village scale. It's a very nice story from the picture top left. That's in a place in Ethiopia, in the south of Ethiopia. In the Rift Valley, there's a town called Arba Minch. In Arba Minch, it's very, very hot, very, very dry. There's lots of malaria, and it's actually very difficult to cultivate Artemisia. They've got lots of moringa, which is good news, but no Artemisia. An hour away by car, up the mountain, there's another place called Chencha. And when I drove up there at 10 o'clock in the morning, Chencha was still in the cloud. Now, Artemisia grows like a dream in Chencha. And so the church has organized that many small-scale farmers grow Artemisia. They grow it and they dry it and they put it into plastic bags, a bit like this. So there's one treatment for malaria in one plastic bag. And then the local church gives them equivalent of about 50 cents for each bag full of dried Artemisia. Now that has been enough to actually lift that community economically, and so many more children are now attending school because they can afford the books and the school uniform and so on. Meanwhile, down in the valley, where there's all this malaria, I should have said that up on the mountain there's no malaria, it's not hot enough. But down in the valley, the people benefit enormously there because these bags of tea are passed on to the malaria patients, still at just 50 cents, and so they have an effective treatment for their malaria. But not everybody was happy in the valley, because the hospitals were not happy. Because, as you can imagine, they were a little bit skeptical of these amateurs who came down with their own herbal remedy. Well, they were skeptical until some of the nurses in the hospital themselves had malaria and found that the chloroquine wasn't working, and then came along and took Artemisia tea. So I think today it's rather more accepted. Down on the right, it shows a village in the north of Uganda where they've got the Artemisia plants right next to the village. But my criticism of that is that you see that the ground's not covered. And what we know about the tropics today is that where the sun beats down on uncovered ground, the surface of the earth becomes so hot that the microorganisms die. And so in that way the ground loses fertility. But it's now increasingly well known that in nature the ground is never bare, it's always covered. It's always covered with grass or leaves or something. So on the bottom left you see where the maize stalks have been left on the ground, and that's a much better picture. Okay. Now, how do we propagate Artemisia? Artemisia is a hybrid. That means that if you sow the seeds of the Artemisia, if you take the seeds of the plant that's growing, well, you can't guarantee that the plants from those seeds will have exactly the same properties as the plant from which the seeds come. And so we recommend that you either take cuttings, as we show there, take cuttings, strip most of the leaves off, and put them in earth, or you use this system of what we call layering. Yeah. Okay. Then we harvest the leaves, we dry them. There we have an example of a solar dryer. We rub them through a sieve, and we put them in bags that are nicely labelled like this. And where those ladies are harvesting, they go through these plants, through these fields and harvest the leaves once every 3 months or so, because they can harvest the leaves, they grow again, they harvest the leaves again, they grow again. But as soon as the plant starts to flower, like this one is just starting to flower, then the leaves should be harvested. Yes. And the dosage is an infusion, that's where you pour the boiling water over the dried leaves, 5 grams of leaves in 1 litre of boiling water, and you drink in the course of the day. And you take for 7 to 10 days, even if you feel better after 1 or 2 days. And of course, it's very tempting to stop the treatment if you begin to feel better. But we want to get rid of all those plasmodium in our blood, so it's important to keep taking it for 7 days. And there's a treatment for children as well. It's listed in our seminar handbook here, that particular table. Not every child is very happy to take bitter Artemisia tea, but you can mix the Artemisia leaves with honey or yogurt or banana, and I can tell you actually, if you mix it with honey, it's actually pretty good. It tastes quite good. So we're very, very happy because many people tell us it's the best treatment for malaria, and not only that, after they've treated their malaria with Artemisia, that they go for a much longer period of time before having malaria again. And that too, of course, is very important. At the same time as drinking Artemisia tea, we recommend that people drink 2 litres of lemongrass tea. Now, the good news about lemongrass tea is that it tastes nice. In fact, it tastes so good, I drink lemongrass tea for my breakfast every day. And I think it helps. The main property of lemongrass tea is that it helps to reduce fever. It stimulates the function of the kidney, helps it to clean the blood. And of course, you certainly don't want living plasmodium in your blood, but you don't want particularly to have dead plasmodium in your blood either. Okay. There are many other treatments for malaria. You might just be interested quickly if I run through some of them. One is garlic, but garlic is very good in general. It's antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal, anti-almost anything you name. So you can, if we eat raw garlic, it's got to be raw, then it protects us against all manner of things. It also protects us against malaria, and if you take a lot of it, like 3 heaped tablespoonfuls of raw garlic, wow, that's a bit of a lot, then it can actually treat mild malaria. It actually helps to protect you against malaria, because not only does it work internally, but the scent of garlic comes out a little bit through the skin, and that makes it rather unlikely that a mosquito is going to bite you. Ginger is also a treatment. We boil 1 handful of fresh chopped ginger root in 1 litre of water for 10 minutes. That's what we call a decoction. When you boil the herb together with the water for 10 or 15 minutes, that's what we call a decoction. Okay. You might well have heard of guava. That generally speaking, when it's boiled as a vegetable, you boil it, you throw the water away, you boil it again, throw the water away, and then you can eat it. This is our friend cinchona tree that produces the quinine from the bark. Very effective. They also had a lot of nasty side effects. And so that is largely why the whole world is so enthusiastic about Artemisia annua. So Artemisia, a bit like papaya, is not only useful for one thing, but has many, many functions. It's very good for preventing colds and flu. And if you catch a cold coming on at the early stages, it can stop it developing. So in our climate here, that's at this time of year, that's very useful to know. It's good for eye infections and many other infections. Quite a lot of people have reported that they've had rather nasty bladder infections that have not always been treated effectively with antibiotics, but Artemisia as a natural antibiotic has been successful. Hemorrhoids, got good stories about hemorrhoids and Artemisia tea internally and Artemisia ointment externally, and bilharzia, which is rather a nasty tropical disease. Artemisia contains, in fact, more than 250 constituents, and I'll just say a few words later to say that Artemisia is proving itself to be increasingly useful with cancer. Excellent. A few words about Moringa oleifera. Moringa oleifera, it originally comes from India. Now it's to be found throughout Africa. A lot of people say, moringa, yeah, we know it, but what's it for? We don't believe it anymore, because a few years ago the government encouraged us to grow Moringa oleifera. They told us there'd be a market for the seeds, but in fact there's no market for the seeds. We can't sell them. So what's the point of growing moringa? Well, I'm happy to say that a lot more people can be very confident today in talking about the importance of moringa, because they have seen how many undernourished and even malnourished children who've had diarrhea and skin problems and you name it, they've had it, problems, they've been given moringa, and relatively quickly they've come back to health and strength.